In this public hearing of the Joint Standing Committee on Treaties for its inquiry into the Papua New Guinea Australian Mutual Defence Treaty. I'm Lisa Chesters. I'm the current chair of the Treaties Committee, and around us today we have senators and members of the House of Representatives and others that might be joining us online. As you can appreciate, Parliament's always a busy time, but it's also a good time for us to be able to do these hearings in person. I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners on the lands on which we meet and pay my respects to elders both past and present. I'd also like to extend that respect to any First Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us today. In accordance with the Committee's resolution of 31 July 2025, this hearing will be broadcast and proof and official transcripts of the proceedings will be published on the Parliament's website. A reminder, members of the media, for the need for fair and accurate reportings of the proceedings of the committee. I remind all present, as chair, I will ensure proceedings are conducted in an orderly, respectful and courteous manner. I'd like to now call our witnesses for today's hearing. I now welcome representatives of the Department of Defence and Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade to give evidence today. For the Hansard record, would you please state your full name and the capacity in which you are appearing before the committee?
Thank you, Chair. Ms Sue Bodell, I am the First Assistant Secretary for the Pacific at the Department of Defence.
Thanks, Justin Lee, First Assistant Secretary of the Melanesia Division in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade.
Kate Mitchell, Acting Assistant Secretary of the International Law Branch at DFAT.
Chris Taylor, Director General, Military Legal Service, Department of Defence.
Thank you. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, this hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament and therefore has the same standings as proceedings of the respective houses. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. It is the responsibility of witnesses to accurately record any questions or notice that are taken. Would you like to make an opening statement?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. I'd like to also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I also pay my respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander men and women who have defended Australia in peace and war. I'd like to make my opening statement on behalf of the Department of Defence and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Thank you for the opportunity to address this committee on the Papua New Guinea Australia Mutual Defence Treaty, otherwise known as the Pukpuk Treaty. I'd like to take the opportunity to outline our strategic rationale underpinning the treaty itself and the treaty's purpose and scope. Papua New Guinea proposed this treaty in its 50th year of independence, and Australia was very honoured to agree. Our nations share a long and proud history of partnership, and the Pukpuk Treaty reflects a shared vision for a secure and stable Pacific. This is Australia's first alliance in more than 70 years. It makes Papua New Guinea only our third ally, joining the United States and New Zealand. This is a rare distinction reflecting the extraordinary trust between our nations. Our defence cooperation was forged during the Second World War when Australians and Papua New Guineans fought shoulder to shoulder. And since PNG's independence in 1975, we've continued that work as equal partners in defence and security. When Prime Minister Albanese signed the Pukpuk Treaty alongside Prime Minister Marape on the 6th of October 2025, he captured the spirit of our relationship. He said that the treaty reflects the deep trust between Australia and Papua New Guinea across the breadth of our bilateral relationship, and that our alliance is built on generations of mutual trust and demonstrates our commitment to ensuring the Pacific remains peaceful, stable and prosperous. That commitment endures today. Papua New Guinea is one of Australia's most important defence partners and home to our most comprehensive defence cooperation program anywhere in the world. The Pukpuk Treaty establishes a clear, legally binding framework for the mutual defence of Australia and Papua New Guinea. This treaty stands on strong foundations, building upon the defence cooperation arrangement between Australia and Papua New Guinea, the Status of Forces Agreement between Australia and Papua New Guinea, and the Papua New Guinea-Australia Bilateral Security Agreement to shape our cooperation, but not replacing or terminating previous agreements. The Pukpuk Treaty takes these efforts further. Article 1 establishes the treaty's purpose of protecting sovereignty, securing our mutual defence and security interests, and contributing to regional stability and security through enhanced capability, interoperability and integration. Article 3 sets out core principles, including respect for sovereignty, trust-based cooperation, and clear commitment to ensure that any activities with third parties do not compromise the purpose of the treaty. Article 4 establishes the mutual defence provisions. These include an obligation to consult as requested if either nation faces a security-related development that threatens its sovereignty, peace or stability. Further, in the event of an armed attack on either party within the Pacific, the parties declare that they would act to meet a common danger. This mutual defence obligation is similar in nature to Australia's commitments under the ANZUS Treaty. Article 5 requires us to engage in defence cooperation activities together. This may include activities such as joint operations, combined exercises, intelligence and information sharing, cyber and space cooperation, capability development, logistics integration and personnel exchanges. The treaty also supports a recruitment pathway for Papua New Guinea citizens to join the ADF, with a pilot program already underway. Articles 6 and 8 and Annexes A and B update privileges and immunities for visiting forces, both for regular cooperative activities and for circumstances where we are working together in the event of operational contingency. Article 7 and Annex C provide for agreed facilities and areas, thereby allowing for Australian access, joint use, training, pre-positioning of equipment, infrastructure development and long-term planning of defence-related locations within PNG, all with full respect for Papua New Guinea's sovereignty. These arrangements will ensure that the ADF and PNG Defence Force can train, operate and respond together more effectively than before. The treaty supports the sovereign decision-making of both Papua New Guinea and Australia throughout and sets a consultative approach to how both parties manage the common aspects of their defence relationship. The 2024 National Defence Strategy makes it clear the Pacific is vital to Australia's security and prosperity. It directs defence to strengthen defence engagement with Indo-Pacific partners and to uphold peace and security across our shared region. The Pukpuk Treaty and our new alliance forms a central part of that response. It represents a significant step forward, strengthening our shared security and providing a modern framework to expand the defence partnership built over decades. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I was just hoping that you could outline for us how this treaty does differ from other treaties that we've sort of held inquiries about in more recent times. So we've had, since the forming of this committee, since the last election, had a couple of defence treaties come before us, one with the UK around cooperation, and then more recently with Nauru and the security treaties. So how does this one with Papua New Guinea differ?
Chair, if I might, I think that the primary difference is this is a mutual defence treaty, so it establishes our third alliance. There are elements within the treaty that do cross over, certainly the defence cooperation article, which articulates the nature and way in which we cooperate, would cross over with the other treaties. But the really unique element around this treaty is that article which speaks to the mutual defence of our two nations. I might defer to my legal colleague who was also appeared for certainly for the UK treaty to highlight any other differences.
Yeah, Chair, I think as Ms Bodell's already explained, the principal difference is probably the scope. The UK treaty, it is a more probably more distant in the sense that the relationship is not as geographically focused, and also the relationship in terms of Australia and Papua New Guinea, in terms of the shared close political relationship and diplomatic relationship and geographic relationship over the recent century or so.
So what does that mean sort of day to day? So, you know, obviously if we're attacked or they're attacked, we come to each other's aid. But in times of peace, when we're not under that immediate attack, what would that mean on a practical day to day sort of year to year basis?
So, Chair, the treaty itself captures our defence cooperative activities, but it does capture activities that we've been undertaking and building on for decades. PNG is one of our longest defence relationships, and it's, as I mentioned in the opening remarks, it's our most substantive defence cooperation program. So the treaty codifies a lot of the cooperative activities that we've been building on for a very long time. So day to day, what it's going to see is an increase in the activities and sophistication as we move forward. And that will be governed by the two governments at the time, what the direction is from the governments on where they'd like to take us. But on a day-to-day basis, we are seeing more integration. So we have PNGDF officers serving in positions within the ADF, and we have a very big footprint over in Papua New Guinea to ensure that we are talking daily. We are developing our training so that we can operate alongside one another. And those embed relationships allow us to really understand and integrate how we operate in for defence. The best practice we have is exercises and then operations.
And why now? Like, I mean, yes, it's the 75th anniversary since their independence, if that's right.
50th, yeah.
50th anniversary since independence, 75th or a bit longer than that, in terms of, you know, engagement that we've had through other conflicts in the area, specifically in relation to the Second World War. But why now?
I couldn't speak for the PNG government. It was as we'd articulated and the Prime Minister articulated at the time. This was an ask that came from Prime Minister Marape. So it was the PNG government who made that offer and stepped forward. So I couldn't speak to their thoughts, but for us, it was. I know that the government was honoured to agree to the treaty. And it's about a natural next step with such a close relationship in the current strategic environment.
And two final questions before I go to others on the committee. Have we had to consult or engage with New Zealand because we're making this step, or because they're the other country that we have a similar relationship with? And if we have, what are their views on the situation, or do we not need to? Like, is there an obligation or a role for us to consult New Zealand?
So we consulted with our close partners in agreement with Papua New Guinea in the lead up to the treaty and pre-briefed close partners, and obviously New Zealand and the US as our existing alliances were amongst those that we engaged with. And
their views on it?
I think we haven't had negative views. They're very supportive of the strengthening of the relationship and the I'd leave it there.
And my final question is, does this treaty, present us with any of those sort of opportunities in terms of our defence and defence industries that we have in our country?
I would say that the relationship at large has provided that over the years. We've as I say, it's the largest defence cooperation program, and through that program and over the decades we have provided equipment and capability to Papua New Guinea. So in the natural course of the direction the relationship takes, I have no doubt that we will continue to look at capability between the two, between ourselves, and that will no doubt provide opportunity. Where that would lie would be hypothetical at this point, but we have provided a lot of equipment over the years, and we will continue to develop the relationship in the future.
Other questions? Yeah. Okay, we'll go to Alison first.
Sorry, would you mind if I went first? Just
Yeah,
'cause
sorry.
we're going to have a whole bunch of divisions, and
No,
I'm going
go
to have to
for
run off. And I do have a lot of questions, but I'm going to try and truncate them into a couple so that we can just get it across the line. In terms of the uplifting that you're going to do for the PNG Defence Force, do you have a cap on that spending, or is it just, do you have any strategy around that? And particularly in terms of I guess, if it's going to be Australian technology, Australian capabilities that we're going to share with the PNG Defence Force, any security around the technology transfer or the technology that we'll be sharing with them, and whether the treaty is actually enforceable. So, for instance, if they signed a security deal with another foreign country, or if there were potentially a dual base that you were concerned about, does that treaty remain enforceable, and what can you do about that if it does get impacted? And I'm just going to put them all on the table, and you can speak to them. If I have to run out, I will run out. And in terms of the treaty and the foreign attack, let's say 2027, Bougainville does become independent, and in that process there is a conflict with Papua New Guinea and it attacks the mainland. Does the treaty get triggered, and what will Australia's role be in that? And if Australia sits out because of its relationship with Bougainville, is the alliance no longer in force? And the same with Indonesia. We just signed not an alliance, but a security agreement with Indonesia. If something happens in West Papua, for example, and that spills over the border, what's Australia's role going to be with that? Oh, shoot, I've got to go. Okay.
No worries.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Maybe you can listen in for me to the...
And if there's any follow-up questions, just let us know and we'll feed them in.
Would you like me to go through
Yes,
those?
please do.
As far as the uplift goes, I think it's probably better to sort of articulate. We have an architecture for the relationship. Obviously, at the most senior level, our two defence ministers meet annually to discuss and prioritise where they want us to focus our engagement, and that sets the very high level guidance for us on the relationship going forward. On an annual, and being defence, we sort of project out into the future. Sitting underneath that, we have an annual engagement of the two secretaries and the two chiefs of Defence Force who come together in defence cooperation talks. Through that mechanism, our leadership are able to prioritise where we're going to cooperate, and that will dictate where and when uplift and or activities or operations occur. So it's not it's never a sort of a linear, steady increase in costs or activities. It's based on the capacity of the forces at the time, what else is going on, the directions that we get from our respective governments of where they'd like us to focus, and then that will dictate the level of and focus of cooperation and uplift. And that will be met as a proportion of our overall allocation for defence cooperation funding for the Pacific, which is at the regional level. It has been substantive over the years, and it will go in peaks and troughs when government seeks to invest in major new commitments like Lombrum Naval Base. Obviously, that was a particular peak in the amount we were spending on the Papua New Guinea relationship. That will drop off as we don't have any major infrastructure projects. On technology transfer, we are governed by, often it is ITARS controlled, or if it's technology that's governed by a third party, we have set procedures that we need to go through. It's a very technical legal process. We have to go back to the originator of the equipment if it's not our sovereign equipment. And outside of that, we have very clear processes depending on the nature of the capability that we are providing to our partners, and in this case, our new alliance partner, PNG. So that very much comes down to the type of equipment and where it originates from, and who owns the intellectual property around that equipment. And we would do that on a case-by-case basis, depending on the nature of the equipment, whether it would go up to government or if it was something much smaller, whether it actually triggered any concerns around the technology transfer. With regards to the treaty being enforceable, we have clauses in the treaty which relate to any concerns and the mechanisms to which we would have conversations if there were elements that would be triggered. Again, I would go back to the well-practiced architecture we have around our relationship. So at the broader level, we have the ministerial forum where a number of ministers from both sides of government get together on an annual basis. There's an opportunity to discuss any concerns. We have the two defence ministers, obviously the opportunities there for leaders if it's of significant concern. But through this regular architecture, which then goes to the second secretary and CDF level, and then at other levels with regular touch points, we have the opportunity to bed down and have conversations about how this treaty will operate between the two countries, and have early discussions if there's anything that would be of concern. We're obviously at very early stages, and both governments are still going through the implementation process to bring the treaty into force. But those mechanisms and that existing architecture will enable us to have robust conversations around how the treaty operates in practice. With regards to Bougainville, I think that's a difficult one to ask because it's a scenario, a sort of a fictitious scenario in the future, but our government's policy on Bougainville is well established. I might ask Justin to outline that policy.
Yeah, thanks very much, Sue. Just on Bougainville and on Indonesia and the Papuan provinces. I might actually start with Indonesia because I think the treaty is very clear in emphasising that the two parties, Australia and PNG, respect the territorial integrity and sovereignty of each other and of our neighbours. And of course, Indonesia is one of those. And as Sue says, this is about building the architecture for the trust for dealing with issues as they arise. And both emphasising that point of respecting territorial integrity and sovereignty of neighbours. We also have our own bilateral security agreements and defence arrangements with Indonesia, and Papua New Guinea does as well. And now we have trilateral dialogue. So there was the first Defence Ministers' trilateral discussion between Indonesia, Papua New Guinea and Australia. So I think the key thing there is that actually this agreement and the other agreements, bilateral and trilateral, that we have with Indonesia and with Papua New Guinea are really creating that architecture to deal with any issues as they arise. And so really it's building that architecture and that confidence. So that's the Indonesia situation. On Bougainville, our position has been very clear that we see this as a matter for the government of Papua New Guinea and for the autonomous Bougainville government. They've got an ongoing process to work out the future political status of Bougainville. That's been going on for a number of years and is continuing this year. They have a UN endorsed moderator that's taking those conversations forward. So we're very clear that should be subject to a political process, and it's a political process between the two parties, between the PNG government and the autonomous Bougainville government. The PNG government has made a number of statements, which I won't speak for the PNG government, but it has been very committed to a peaceful, ongoing discussion on the future status of Bougainville. So it's probably hypothetical to talk about any other situation other than that at the moment. Thanks.
Okay. Of course, yeah.
What the Senator was trying to inquire was the reference to Article 4.3 around where it says where each party would act if there's an armed attack on either country, and it's trying to understand what counts as an armed attack. And I appreciate the Senator used a hypothetical scenario with Bougainville, but it's just trying to understand in what kind of scenario would an armed attack give rise to the execution under Article 4.3. So would Australia have to step in if there is any sort of domestic unrest, terrorism, or, as the Senator was suggesting, a Bougainville secession?
So I think on your question about domestic unrest, the bilateral security agreement, the Pukpuk alliance is about an external armed attack from a third party. The Papua New Guinea government, under the bilateral security agreement, has the ability to ask our assistance, and we are providing assistance to their government at the moment. We have negotiators in place. We are providing training and support to their police to respond. So that's a matter for the bilateral security agreement. This treaty refers to external armed attacks, so that would address the internal issues as you've articulated them. The decision on what constitutes an external armed attack is a decision that will be taken by the governments of the day, with legal advice provided. So it's very difficult to answer that without getting involved in hypotheticals, but it would be defined by, and it would be a matter for the two governments of the day, with legal advice on what constitutes an external armed
So it'll be on a mutual agreement, but on PNG terms to protect the sovereign interests.
Well, it would be up to both parties to deem it's been an external armed attack, to require them to come together and determine how they would act in response.
Did you have any other questions?
No, that's all right. I just wanted to...
That's okay. All right, we'll jump over here to Alison and then we'll come back. Okay, all right. All right, sorry. Yep, go for it. Go for it, Claire.
I just had one. In the papers provided to us, it talks about procurement and the need to honour, I guess, using PNG companies, services and workers as much as possible when the ADO is procuring services. And I just wondered if you could give us an insight into whether that's even possible, what sort of marketplace skills, services, products, workers are actually available on the ground in PNG that the ADO might have recourse to. And if there isn't a viable marketplace, does that mean goods, products, services, workers would be procured from Australia, and what does that mean for costs, resources and risks?
So we do, in the first instance, we look at what's available locally. Often, it's the closest to market, so it's going to reduce the cost. A good example is we work very closely with to ensure that there's a good representation of local workers in our infrastructure projects. And we will run procurement processes where possible to either engage local contractors in the procurement process, or where we're going outside of that and there's not that market available in country, where we encourage and put into our contracts to encourage the tenderers to ensure that they engage as many local employees as possible. It very much depends on the nature of what we're seeking to do, but certainly, we will look in country if there are providers available, and that would be our first point, and then back to Australian industry where it's a larger purchase or a particularly technical purchase.
Understood. Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Alison.
There we go.
As you said in your opening statement, this is a very significant treaty. There's only 3 of their kind. What are our expectations of PNG's ability to service the treaty in the context of an armed conflict?
So we work with Papua New Guinea, and we have increased recently the level of activities we do with Papua New Guinea. So last year, for the first time, we undertook Exercise Talisman Sabre, our major exercise in Papua New Guinea, cooperating with them. And over the years, we have increased the level of engagement and interoperability we have. Obviously, that question depends on where each country is on the day that the treaty gets called into question. Our ANZUS treaty is now 75 years old, but through that time, military sizes in all three countries have ebbed and flowed. The ability of each country to respond, and the governments are going to make that decision on the day. But on a day-to-day basis now, through the relationship, our focus is on increasing the integration and interoperability, and we do that by training together. We have a number of PNG-DF personnel in various training institutions in Australia, and we've done that for a long time, but we're increasing that focus. One of the more recent moves is to embed PNG-DF officers in key roles within the ADF, either as instructors or in actual command positions or deputy commander roles. And we will continue to work closer and closer together to make sure that we maximise that interoperability, and by having the embeds, that level of integration, that so if called upon by governments, we can work seamlessly together.
Yeah. What you just said, though, it sounds like there's a lot of effort on our end, but what about from PNG in terms of this is a mutual treaty, like there's obligations on both sides? What are the opportunities for Australian ADF personnel to, learn from PNG ADF? It's a mutual treaty. Yeah. You've just described everything we're giving. What about from the other side?
Well, all of those activities are mutual, particularly the exercises and the operations and the training. So the training activities occur both in Australia and in Papua New Guinea. Jungle warfare training, PNG are experts in that. That's a skills transfer that's of high value to our ADF personnel. So those sorts of learnings, it's both ways when we undertake these exercises and activities together. So I'm sorry if I misled. I didn't mean to say it was one way. Obviously, there are the formal training opportunities where we invite people into our colleges. But the exercises, the practical training activities, it's always a two-way process when you're operating alongside colleagues from another nation. Each learn from the other.
Is it very land-based? I mean, that's the bulk of the personnel that PNG has. What about from a maritime and air perspective? Is there... Where do we go with that?
So we have a growing air relationship. It's relatively nascent. The re-standing up of PNGDF's air transport wing, but we're working very closely, and it is improving and growing at a rapid rate. We have pilots that are undertaking training in Australia, but we have our Royal Australian Air Force personnel embedded there as part of our Defence Cooperation Program on the ground, working side by side with their PNGDF counterparts as PNG regrows that air wing. And we are engaging. We had PNGDF air wing down for Pitch Black, where they brought their aircraft down, in fact played a really critical role in supporting, I want to say, was it the Italians? We had an air crash in Pitch Black, and it was the PNGDF who operated the right airframe to be able to get in and provide that support in immediate time. So very much PNG contributing to a really important response on the ground for an aircraft. We've had a long-standing relationship with the Maritime Wing through the PMSP program, so the Pacific Maritime Security Program, and its predecessor, the Pacific Patrol Boat Program. And through that, we have embedded Navy personnel as part of our DCP program, working day to day alongside the PNGDF Maritime Wing. And we work very closely with them, both bilaterally on the program and operating the Guardian-class patrol boats, as well as the landing craft. But also they are a key player in our regional elements of that program, where we come together as a region to look at how we can collectively continue to share knowledge and working on the GPBs as the primary platform. So we work across all three areas and engage in activities, exercises, operation and training across all three.
Can I just...
Of course.
Are you aware of any third-party nations that were seeking to develop a treaty with PNG before they came to us in recent times? Were there any actions, say, from North Asian?
The PNG signed a treaty with the United States, a defence cooperation agreement. That's a matter of public record.
Yeah.
Other questions would have to be a question for the Papua New Guinea government.
Thank you.
Any other questions from our Senate? We did get answers to all your questions.
Yeah.
Did you have any more or any follow-ups?
Plenty, but I'll keep it brief because somebody brought me up to speed with the testimony that you gave, and thank you so much for following through with the answers while I was gone. I guess my question on Bougainville, I understand it is a hypothetical, but there is historical precedence for that. And I think where we run into potential issues with the treaty is if Bougainville does become independent from Papua New Guinea, it's a very strategic island for China. If there were to be a potential base there or an attack from from Bougainville onto Papua New Guinea, some serious questions will have to be raised about the alliance and what we do. One of the submissions, or the only submission rather, from Joanne Wallace was that perhaps sanctions could be raised. I just want to, understand whether the government has thought about the hypotheticals of the alliance. I mean, we have security agreements right across the Pacific where we're seeing that already tested. Do you have strategies around that?
Maybe, Senator, I'll just come back to that. My main point at the outset was that there is a process that's going ahead in order to avoid a return to conflict. I think both parties are very committed to that, both the PNG government and the autonomous Bougainville government. And they've invested a lot in the current political process of talks, which is going ahead with Richard Smith now, who's the mediator. Last year had Sir Jerry Matapare from New Zealand, who was the mediator. And they're trying to come to common ground on what is the future status of Bougainville. And we appreciate that that's a matter for the two parties. We've been very prepared to be supportive of that process in a resourcing way. We've provided some funding so that they can get UN support and hold the meetings. So we've been very prepared to support that in that way. And then the two sides need to work out what the future direction is. And I think there's still quite some way to go in those conversations. There's quite ambitious timelines. And as you know, there's quite strong aspirations from the ABG, from the Autonomous Bougainville Government, which we're very aware of. But by the same token, I think both sides are trying to understand just what's possible. The PNG government is looking to provide greater powers and is also very much focused on helping the ABG develop its economic development, and that also is a strong focus of the ABG at the moment. How do they prepare themselves, whatever future political status they get? And economic development is a really important part of that as well. So we are very conscious of it as an issue, But there is a process that's in train. It's a peaceful process. It's not a process that is pointing towards any kind of return to conflict. There are internal security issues in Bougainville, as there are in other parts of Papua New Guinea. And as Sue mentioned, we have a bilateral security agreement where we're helping with internal security. In Bougainville, we don't do quite so much on internal security. We've helped with justice centres and some delivery of court services and things in Bougainville. The New Zealand government does more on increasing policing capacity within Bougainville, and that is hopefully addressing helping address the internal security issues amongst Bougainvillians themselves. That's not Bougainville towards PNG, but that's just amongst Bougainvillians. And the PNG government appreciates that also that the security inside Bougainville is a matter for the Bougainvillians, so they're not intervening in that space at all at the moment. So I guess in summary, it's just there is a process underway, and we're following that process very closely, and we're being as supportive as we can be for the current circumstances.
Okay. And just on the uplift of the PNG DF, I asked before about the capability transfer and the risks around, I guess, the passing on of technologies to third parties. But what about gun leakage? We'll be providing guns, I guess, and ammunition to PNG, and talking about internal security matters. Is that something that's having to be strategised within our own government and Defence Force?
So, Senator, we have been working with PNGDF for many years on these issues. Over the years, we've invested heavily in ongoing maintenance and repair and building of magazines and armouries, including alert systems, and obviously working with our colleagues over in PNGDF on training. As you'll be aware, the government did announce on the 20th of October that we would be committing to the uplift of PNGDF capability with the provision of Australian-made combat rifles. As part of the rollout, and it's a good example of what you're talking about, as part of that rollout, the package will include additional work on armouries, training, and additional steps to enhance weapons security. And that will come on top of the work that we've done over many years in enhancing the security of the facilities in which those weapons are stored. When we make a decision like that, we will apply governance and risk mitigation processes, and that would apply to all military equipment to foreign governments. But this will include measures to make sure that we're preventing the diversion of weapons and that we are fulfilling all our obligations under the Arms Trade Treaty. And may I ask about one of the schedules? I think you mentioned before that you have respect for sovereign decisions, but also, of course, there's decisions about security and what the alliance actually entails. So how do you mitigate, I guess, sovereign decisions about what a country has to do, Papua New Guinea has to do in terms of its security and arrangements that it has to make with other third parties, and that respect for sovereign decisions? I think that the treaty itself has clear provisions in there that neither party will undertake any arrangements or agreements with a third party that would impact on our ability to meet the treaty obligations. So it will be part of that architecture that we have in place and that we will continue to build on, that we are having continual discussions with our newest alliance partner about where any of those sensitivities might be, where those concerns might be raised, and to ensure that as part of that architecture, that we are having regular engagement and talking to each other about security developments that may raise questions in regards to those issues. So that will very much come down to the robust architecture we have in place, and the regular engagement and conversations between the parties.
Okay. So prior to the alliance being signed, there was precedence of, I guess the high risk of China signing a security agreement with Papua New Guinea. I don't believe there was engagement and dialogue with Australia before that. That security agreement for that time was taken off the table, but what is the risk of that now, especially following the alliance? Do you think that has shut down that conversation, or is that risk still there?
I think the treaty has set out a very clear framework that we need to consult each other on any agreements that may impact on our ability to undertake our obligations under the treaty. And it sets out very clear mechanisms about other parts of and other articles in the treaty where a conversation needs to occur between the two parties about the role that third parties might play.
Do you have an assessment of the risk, though, of a third party signing an agreement with Papua New Guinea at this stage?
I think that would be a matter for the Papua New Guinea government.
Okay. Do you have any updates on the applications for Papua New Guinea citizens coming into the Australian Defence Force under the Pukpuk Treaty and the application for citizenship that they need here in Australia? How's that tracking?
So my understanding is that we're over 25 and it may be in excess of that. I think there's been a few additional applications. I can't give you the exact number, but we've certainly know that the last number I had was 25, and I think that's grown, of Papua New Guinea nationals already resident in Australia. So that's the first part of our recruitment initiative, and that's open to Papua New Guinea nationals who are present in Australia, and those applications are in the process of working their way through the recruitment system domestically in Australia. With the recruitment directly from Papua New Guinea, we have had one working group meeting with PNG officials that occurred last year, and I will be getting on a plane tomorrow for the second one of those, where we are continuing to work with our PNG colleagues to really develop a brand new pathway for recruitment and consult with them on how do we make this work for both nations. It's new for us, and it's certainly new for them, and it's a complex process of understanding different education systems. How do we align with that? So it's an ongoing conversation, but we are certainly making progress in those consultations.
Do you have any idea yet, I know I've asked this a few times in estimates, but do you have any idea yet on the numbers that you're expecting? Is there a match between the Papua New Guinean government's expectations and the Australian government's expectations? Or the Defence Forces? I mean, there might even be a mismatch between those two levels as well.
Yeah. So we have a cap for Defence Force recruitment annually, and PNG nationals will come within that cap. But as far as the numbers go, I think the Prime Minister responded to the comments that were made by various PNG ministers that over time, very open to ambition with those numbers, but it will take time. Our focus at the moment is on developing the best process that we can put in place to make it a success. And for that, the numbers will start small to allow us to test those processes, to make sure that we have them all right, that we are following a system that works on the best outcome for both parties. And then once we've got that well established, then we can grow it to a larger size. But numbers of that magnitude will happen over a period of time.
Okay. And my apologies if you answered this in the question while I was away, but in terms of the uplift of the Papua New Guinean Defence Force, is the budget for that additional to the budget that we already have for the Defence Force, and is any of the Foreign Affairs budget going into this particular treaty?
No. So we have regional allocation of Defence Cooperation Program funding, and traditionally PNG has benefited from a large proportion of that funding. In addition to that, over the recent years, we've had particular initiatives which government has sought to fund. So one of the most sizable initiatives was obviously the redevelopment of Lombaran Naval Base, and that was a separately funded from Defence through the reallocation of resources to support that initiative. So It will come from various sources, either through the Defence Cooperation Program funding allocation within Defence, or where there's a specific need, we will go back to government to seek approval for those initiatives, which may be offset from elsewhere, but that's a future government decision. But it's a mixture of both.
Okay. And the funding, are we...
No, keep going.
Thank you. The funding for the Regional Defence Initiative is... Do you have the numbers there, or am I able to get that on notice, what we have over the forwards for that?
Sorry, you mean the Defence Cooperation?
Yeah, the Regional Defence Cooperation. You said that the money came from that particular part of the budget.
So for the Pacific region, for financial year 25-26, it's $335 million.
And is that obviously goes towards our operations in the Pacific, as well as what we're doing in Papua New Guinea?
So, yeah, Papua New Guinea is a proportion of that total, and it covers our defence cooperation programs across the Pacific region. Right. Obviously, depending on the priorities that are agreed as part of the annual talks for those relationships, it ebbs and flows between different countries, where we might make a particular investment in supporting them to rebuild something or to refit out something. That might mean a peak for that particular country, and then it might just be training activities the next year. So it's very much governed by the annual talks, where we set together the priorities for the defence cooperation relationship.
Yep, okay. And on the third-party agreements, what's the scope of these that might undermine the treaty? Like, are there other things like telecommunications that might impact on it?
We do seek for consultation on things that might impact the ability to engage in defence activities. So if in Annex C, sub-article, Article 1, 9 and 10 cover the conversations that we would need to have around third parties having access to facilities in the near area. So we do, obviously, as you'd appreciate, Senator, there's some facilities that would directly impact on the ability of both Defence Forces to undertake their activities. So the treaty would allow us to have a conversation on those types of initiatives.
Okay. I think that's it from me.
Yep, great.
Thank you very much.
Check to see if there's any other questions. Okay. Right on time. How's that? I'd like to thank you for your attendance here today. You'll be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence, and we'll have the opportunity to request corrections to transcript errors. If you've been asked to provide any additional information, would you please forward to the Secretariat by close of business, Monday the 30th of March 2026. And I now declare this public hearing closed, and thank committee members and our witnesses for their participation. Thank you.